Bonjour, my name is Audrey Peverelli and I'm the head of school here at the Lycée. It is my great pleasure to be here this morning to welcome you to our first ever Mobile Language Learning Experience Conference at the Lycée Français de New York. Bienvenue à notre première conférence sur les expériences d'apprentissage des langues sur les dispositifs mobiles. Bienvenidos a nuestra primera conferencia sobre las experiencias de aprendizaje de lenguas con dispositivos móviles. E bem-vindos à nossa primeira conferência sobre as experiências de aprendizagem de idiomas para dispositivos móveis. Sorry, I don't speak all of your languages, I apologize. To give you a sense of context for this conference, the Lycée Français de New York is a bilingual, independent French-American school that welcomes students from 68 nationalities from pre-K to 12th grade. Our program blends the best of the American independent schools tradition and the French educational system. Fitting for a New York City-based school, we do so in a particularly pluricultural environment, and one that is innovative and collaborative. This conference came to life thanks to Dr. Sonia Rocca, a scholar and teacher of Italian at the Lycée, who received a research grant from the school to develop it. Her vision to bring together researchers and practitioners in language learning for knowledge sharing and for conversation on how to harness the tremendous power of technology to transform language teaching and learning strikes us as particularly fitting for the Lycée. Sonia's vision for this conference aligns with several aspects of our school's mission: a commitment to bilingual education of the highest standard, and preparing students of many origins to be thinkers, leaders, and innovators who are at home in the world. At the Lycée, we see language teaching and learning, above all, as a gateway to the world. Through language learning, students experience culture. Through language learning, students gain new perspectives and points of view. Through language learning, students can better embrace diversity. And through language learning, we can become a more inclusive society. I cannot think of a more powerful asset for young minds in such a fragile world. I would like to thank all of the facilitators who came to animer this conference, for all of you attendees who believed in the conference and who came all this way, and in some cases from very far away, to participate in it. I hope you all enjoy the conference and get a chance to really connect and get to know new people on the subject that you are really passionate about. Thank you.
Aria, can you please show the slide, the map that I sent you? There you go. Hello, everybody. My name is Sonia Rocca, and I'm MOBILLE Conference Chair, just in case you haven't figured it out already. A big welcome to all of you. I'm so happy you're here. You have no idea. You made it. Braving the elements, the storm, and all kinds of personal and professional difficulties. Look at yourself. Look where you're all from. And that's an unbelievable map. I have to pinch myself. I still can't believe it. I see MOBILLE in all of you, and it's called MOBILLE. Repeat after me. MOBILLE. That's the way it's pronounced. It's finally happening. I mean, it's been in the making for 2 years, going back to May 2017, when MOBILLE was just an idea buzzing around in my head. Up until the moment I submitted a proposal for a leadership grant, that's got this all started. Then slowly MOBILLE began to take shape, to become real, thanks to the tremendous support that the school has given to this project in terms of access to resources and expertise, but also for just believing in it. I won't start thanking anybody by name, Academy Award style. The list was just too long, and we all want to hear Lourdes. Nonetheless, I do want to thank the Lycée, the administration, IT, which is at the core of this project, communication, maintenance, catering, security, and also my colleagues and my students as my daily interaction with them inspire me to constantly innovate my teaching and my research. This is a great place to work, and without the lycée, MOBILLE would have never existed. MOBILLE is a new conference, Audrey mentioned it, and it's unique in more than one way. It's hosted by a pre-K-12 school, not a university, and that's unheard of, as far as we know, for an international academic conference. Furthermore, in our first year, we've been awarded the seal of Academic Conference Excellence by the European Scientific Institute. MOBILLE is not your typical academic conference where speakers give a 20-minute talk followed by a 10-minute questions. Presentation have a 45-minute slot to allow presenters to better explain their work and to engage with the audience. However, I'm asking you to please do try to finish 5 minutes earlier than that to allow presenters to get settled in the room and attendees to go to another room for another talk. So yes, it is 45 minutes, but make it more 40 so that everybody can get settled wherever they are going. I'm gonna try to attend as many sessions as possible, but today we do have 4 to 5 concurrent sessions, so I'm gonna hop around, beaming myself, Star Trek style, up, down, and across. I might arrive late at your talk or leave after 10 minutes, trying to be as inconspicuous as possible. Please don't take it to mean that I don't like your presentation. I'm not ubiquitous yet, but I'm working on that. I just want to get a general sense of what's going on in view of the closings that I'll be delivering tomorrow at 4:45 and the intro to the proceedings that I'll be writing soon. About the proceedings, MOBILLE has peer-reviewed proceedings that are open access and instant access. 2 articles have already been published. 1 is about to be published soon. So that's complying with the requirement for the certification of academic excellence. You can still submit. I know some of you would rather do that after the conference. The deadline was this past December 15. Please ignore that. It's because we had to comply with one of the requirements for the Academic Conference Excellence to have publication being issued within 4 months of the conference. So having two papers there already, one is gonna get published within the next few days. I approved this for publication last Monday. There are still about 5, 6 under review. So please do submit it. If you wanna talk to me about this, like I said, some people feel it's better doing it before so they get feedback on what the presentation they're gonna have. Some people would rather wait after the conference. Anyway, I encourage you to submit if you haven't done so. And if you wanna talk to me, here I am. Connect, interact, learn is the MOBILLE motto. And the conference is structured to allow networking among attendees. Longer session. Meals, refreshment, and cocktails included. Areas outside the room where people can talk. You're gonna see walking toward the York room, there's a big area which we call breathing space, and that's where the mid-afternoon refreshments will be served. I want you to think of MOBILLE as a forum, a piazza, where researchers and practitioners interact to build a common ground. This is another interesting feature of MOBILLE, this getting together of researchers and practitioners. Because if practice without research can be blind, research without practice can surely be barren. We have various types of presentation to suit the different types of presenter. We also have virtual presentations that are now available on the MOBILLE Lycée Français de New York YouTube channel. So there are several virtual presentations that have been I uploaded the other day, and you can see these presenters that it's a type of presentation that we thought it would be just pertinent for a conference like MOBILLE, which is a digital technological conference to offer this kind of option for presenter who couldn't physically make it. So take a look. A key ingredient in a successful conference is the keynote speaker. Even since Mobile was in the early stages of its conception, I've always known that Lourdes Ortega, professor of linguistics at Georgetown University, had to deliver the keynote address. Lourdes Ortega is somebody I've admired for a very long time, authors and numerous seminal contributions in the area of multilingualism that I won't list now, but you can find on our website. During the fall, Lourdes spent a day at the Lycée, visiting classes and talking to teachers, students, administrators. She's made a lasting impression on my 6th graders, who still remembers her fondly. She was interviewed in the Media Lab, and videos of her interview are available again on the Mobile YouTube channel. Lourdes wanted to visit the school with the goal of fine-tuning her keynote address. I'm both touched and honored by her dedication to Mobile. So without much further ado, here's Professor Lourdes Ortega.
Good morning, everyone. Let me see. I'm going to situate myself. Can you hear me well? Yes. Yes. Can I see well? That's the next thing I need to check. And see whether the glasses are helpful or not. Maybe. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for the introduction, Sonia. And I'm so excited to be here back in New York after one full semester that I spent last fall here, seeing a lot of Sonia, talking a lot about the conference. And my visit to the Lycée was fantastic. I watched several classes, Spanish and Italian classes. I noticed a lot of students in the corridors. Today were empty because they are on holidays. But the day I visited, there were lots and lots of students talking in French, but also talking in all kinds of languages. Really exciting as an environment. So let me start. There. And I tried to prepare something that would set the tone for your own presentations. I know a lot of people in the audience are great experts in technology, much better experts than me. And those of you who are the practitioners in the conference are even more up to date in what you do with your students. But I tried to see if we can all sort of like gather a framework as we spend the rest of today and tomorrow listening to each other's work. So many thanks to Sonia. I'm happy to share the PowerPoint as well if anyone wants it. And let me start right away thinking of the benefits of using technology to support language learning. Sonia had a special issue in the journal Languages in 2018 with Brian Smith, and the two of them mentioned several of the benefits of technology as things that we can do with technology to ameliorate the limitations of traditional language classrooms. And so some of the benefits very clearly are that we can differentiate instruction much better, that we can provide much more intense input and time on task if we add technology. That is very motivating for many of our students, and that it usually allows us to expose our students to a lot more authentic language. Are there more benefits? I'm sure that each of you has thought of many more, and some of you constantly are catering to particular benefits that you care about more than the other benefits. In a book in 2014 with my very good friend and colleague Marta González Lloret, and also in a book that just came out last year in Spanish, fully published in Spanish, by Marta and Margarita Vinagre, We also identified 2 more benefits that we think are as important as the rest, or 3 of them. Intercultural and socio-pragmatic competence develops particularly well when the classroom is augmented with technology. There is a lot of reflexive metacognition that happens thanks to technology, lots of development, for example, of learning strategies and self-awareness of what kinds of learners students are, and lots of digital learning that happens as a byproduct of engaging our students with technology for language learning. So all of these benefits are all important, and they have been studied by different people in different studies. In my presentation today, I'm going to try to give a highlight or a glimpse of what we know about these benefits of MOBILLE, or mobile language learning experiences, and also with an emphasis on areas where practitioners and scholars have been working together all along. And there is a very useful distinction in my mind that Shannon Soro has used in the past and that I want to use today between 3 types of uses of technologies and types of technologies. We have the digital wilds, and these are places where we can find non-pedagogical sites and apps that people use for leisure and that have been linked to language learning. We also have what Shannon calls domesticated call, or MOBILLE if you want. And these are where things that we find in the wild, non-pedagogical things, are leveraged and bridged into the classroom for language learning. And finally, we have a lot of apps and sites and particular ways of engaging with language learning that are pedagogically created for those purposes, either to use in the classroom or to use autonomously. So dedicated call, for example, is the language learning sites that we have. They are in the wild, but they have been designed to promote language learning. And we can also have dedicated call in the classroom with immersive environments like Croquelandia to teach pragmatics, or with games that are designed specifically to teach grammar points. So what's the difference between wild and domesticated call? Well, think of texting, for example, something we all do in the wild, right? If we do it in the wild, we do it with friends and family. But if we do it as a classroom activity, then we are domesticating that technology for the purpose of language learning. And a good example is a study by Andújar with 40 Spanish students in Spain doing English as a foreign language. They were asked to do a daily posting of a question. Each time a different student would post a question for 6 months. And then the gains were compared against a control group of students in other classes who didn't do this activity. This is an example of the kinds of texting that would happen through that assignment. I won't read it, but it's kind of an interesting problem with the preposition on or at, which is very common with English. And the green color is the teacher trying to probe the students to keep texting about it and solve the issue. And indeed, in that study, there was improved accuracy after the 6 months of doing this kind of assignment. Fernando Rosell Aguilar, who should be in the audience, is he in the audience? There he is. Has a very useful framework, too, for evaluating apps. And it's quite similar to what I am giving you here today. He talks about apps for language learning that have been designed for language learning specifically, and others that have not designed. He also focuses a lot on the outcomes, the linguistic outcomes, the benefits, if you will. And so maybe we can add one more benefit, which is the specific language learning outcomes. More grammar, more vocabulary, better pronunciation, more pragmatics, etc. So let me talk a little bit first about in the wild for leisure technology. The idea is that nowadays everyone has technology in their lives. We're all on, and we're on for leisure, and from a very, very early age. So can we know if our students, with their out-of-school online lives, are learning language for free? And of course, here the research is very, very heavy on learning English because the internet and the gaming industry is so English-oriented. So we have several acronyms: Extramural English, Online Informal Learning of English, OILE, and the one that I prefer is this one, IDLE. So while in the wilds using technology for gaming, for leisure, in an idle way, our students, without us knowing perhaps, are learning English or perhaps other languages. This is very different from these fully autonomous self-instructed learners who intentionally go to the wild looking for ways to learn language on their own. So I'll talk about that later, but that's very different because it's with intention. So those are dedicated apps and sites. I'm talking now about the ones that are completely undomesticated in the wild, and so those are the acronyms. So in the United States, for example, there is a study by Michelle McSweeney using 15 participants using chat. What she did is she asked them to donate to her all their texting, their history of texts with friends and family. And she created a corpus out of it, which actually is reachable online. And she found that the people who sent more messages in English rather than in Spanish were also the ones with higher academic English skills. So a hint of supporting academic English through informal texting in the wild. However, this is a little bit of a chicken or egg problem, right? Maybe the people with higher English are the ones who text more in English with friends and family. There are other studies, though, that are clearer. So in South Korea, for example, where the acronym IDLE was proposed by Lee and Dressman, they really have studied quite a bit now if the quantity and diversity of idle activities can predict English language learning in Korea. So we have a study in TESOL and a very interesting case of a Korean girl, Suja. She was born and raised in a Korean village, remote, very far from any major city, very humble origins, and atypically she had never attended one of the private after-school programs that are so popular in Korea. And yet, during early childhood, Suja was a frequent, enthusiastic online player of World of Warcraft in the English version. That's the key, right? And during her primary school years, she also watched many animated movies and dramas in English. And so suddenly, in the transition from the 9th to the 10th grade, she really felt that English clicked for her. And here's how she describes it. Schools aren't built for my learning. I graduated from middle school in the bottom 10% of all students. I was ranked around 290 out of 320. I had no interest in learning English either. But when I was studying English during the winter vacation after 9th grade, I encountered many words I had heard in online games, such as blizzard, again and again in several English textbooks, and I could figure out their meanings by myself, which was really intriguing to me. I began to memorize more challenging words like iconoclasm. The weirder and harder the vocabulary, the more I got excited. Eventually, all of those inputs from online games became a solid foundation for my English. And now she has excellent English, apparently. So during early childhood, the World of Warcraft gave her massive exposure to oral and written English. And during primary school years, the animated movies and dramas in English allowed her to pick up a large portion of English phonology and a great deal of vocabulary and colloquial expressions. We have similar research in Sweden and France, in Europe, by Sundqvist and Sylvain and Geoffrey Socket, and they concur. There are incidental benefits from gaming, and they are in the area of vocabulary, formulaic language, comprehension, and overall proficiency. And a study just out by Sundqvist looks at commercial off-the-shelf games and concludes that they are good for vocabulary learning. So the games are at the bottom of the screen. Some of you may play these, I don't know. Anyone plays these? Anyone knows that their students play these? Or similar ones, right? So she really did a large-scale study, and she hypothesized that, in fact, depending on the type of game, with more and more participants, it would probably lead to more gains. But in the end, what she found is that nothing accounted for the gains better than the time spent gaming. And so from other studies, we know that it's about 4 hours weekly or more. So you have to be a pretty engaged gamer as a kid in order to get these benefits, right? So these findings are striking, and they're a little bit problematic as well, because gaming is not necessarily looked upon by teachers or parents very kindly all the time, right? There are not just gaming, but other passions in the wild. Fan fiction is a case of them. How many of you have ever participated in a fandom site? Not really. How many of you have students and you know that they are fan subbers or they do fan fiction things? A few people, okay. So in this study, Nino, a 20-year-old Catalan-Spanish bilingual, who was also a learner of English and Japanese, with higher proficiency in Japanese by the time he was interviewed, was a fan subber of Japanese anime into Catalan. And what had happened is that he had picked up the Japanese because he grew up with anime, and he had consumed anime with subtitles in Spanish. And eventually, he actually met people who were doing the fan subbing for Catalan, and that fascinated him. And that's how he started then wanting to learn Japanese and become a translator of the anime original Japanese into Catalan. And so the linguistic and technical skills involved are amazing. For example, using Google Translate for changing between Romaji, Hiragana, and Kanji, and practicing strokes of Kanji and back translating. And his goal was to keep the Japanese flavor in his translation, so he also built a huge glossary for every episode after thorough internet-based research. And he would put this as documentation to his fan subbing activities. He also developed a great appreciation for his first language, Catalan. And he says, I do not come from language studies, but I think I have better Catalan than most people after this experience. Right? So all kinds of weird benefits, learning Japanese, feeling more proud about his Catalan, etc. So in the digital wilds then, we see lots of benefits, many of them with vocabulary, with confidence and willingness to communicate, perhaps with proficiency, but that's a little bit less firm. And the benefits are from incidental learning, learning without wanting to learn the language, doing something for pleasure and then learning incidentally. The time on task seems to be very important. Lots of the studies cover English, so it seems to be a very English-centric kind of activity. And however, there are ways in which anime, Korean dramas, and other types of cultural artifacts on the wild can support incidental in the wild learning of other languages. What about the dedicated technologies for language learning? These are the ones we teachers love because they have been designed for the purpose of teaching language, and because normally many of them are teacher orchestrated. They are under our control, whether we then ask our students to use them inside or outside the classroom. With very young children, we have proof that this kind of dedicated call is highly successful. An example is an iPad created by researchers in Luxembourg to use in activities with very young children to edit texts during group work. And so they evaluated how 6- and 7-year-olds were learning German and French, how they were using this iPad. And here's a transcript from one of the pair work activities between Loan and Lina. And they were recording, and then editing collaboratively to practice French vocabulary. And so here you see that I cannot do any French at all, but I'm looking at the English translation. The plane, the gender of the plane was recorded by Loan as feminine, and it should have been a masculine. So Lina, in the post-recording, softly corrects her, and then Loan is not really understanding so much, but Lina explains, and so Loan deletes, re-records, and now has the masculine gender. So this is a lot of opportunity to collaborate with peers and to provide correction without the teacher-fronted grammar type of correction being needed all the time. And so the benefits of differentiated instruction and metacognitive learning are being seen in this data. Another study, and a fantastic one that I have not found many other examples of, is to put the design of dedicated call into the hands of children. So this was Yuko Butler with 11 and 12-year-olds in Japan in 3 intact classes. She had an amazing team. She was the researcher, she was working with the teachers and also with expert game designers. But they together created an activity that lasted several weeks where the students grouped into 5 or 6 students, and then they would collaborate to design a digital game that would help them learn vocabulary. And then they presented each of the proposals to the class, and they voted on the best proposal. So the children were found to be very able to discuss what elements of gamification are attractive for young users with limited L2 skills, and they also displayed a lot of knowledge of how to study vocabulary, what's good when we need to learn vocabulary. So the benefits were digital learning and metacognitive learning, and also it was very motivating for these kids. But the most popular dedicated call for adults is probably hypertext glosses, and the benefits are clear and documented in reading comprehension and in vocabulary learning. We continue to see primary studies that are published, a very recent one now by Rasai, but also we have a number of meta-analyses, including one in 2008 by Lee Abraham. Is he in the audience? Yeah, there he is. So we have abundance of evidence that hypertext glosses do work. Yeah. Other well-known options for dedicated call could be the technology-delivered grammar instruction that, for example, Liao and Luis Cerezo should also be in the audience, that they have proposed and they have tested empirically. So when we want to focus on a particular grammar point and we create an online game or an online framework to deliver the instruction. The benefits then are grammar, quite concretely, and they implemented this in a study by Cerezo, Caras, and Liao with a game that was the Gustar Maze to teach Gustar to students. A little bit of game-like qualities, like giving them prizes with dollar prizes for learning parts of the Gustar Maze well, and at the same time, lots and lots of specific feedback and explicit feedback. So it was a guided instruction, and then the findings were very conclusive that, yes, guided instruction online with a game like this worked better than the traditional Gustar lesson delivered by the teacher. There are also synthetic immersive environments that are created for use in the class or as a curriculum module outside the class, and they target traditional language learning outcomes, but they're quite complex and goal-directed activity, right? They allow for a lot more sophisticated content and interaction possibilities. So we have 2 experts who have studied gamification and immersive environments, Julie Sykes and Jonathan Reinhardt. Jonathan has now a book that just came out devoted to the topic. And Croquelandia is a nice example. Any of you knows about Croquelandia or has used it or tried it? 2 people, okay. It's a great design from 10 years ago now. Designed to learn or to teach students to make requests and apologies in Spanish. And so the avatars say things to the user, and then there is a set of options for how to answer. And so if they are pragmatically correct, the story continues. But if they are pragmatically infelicitous, then the avatar just does something really awful and doesn't comply, it's not nice, yeah? So then the student has to keep trying until the pragmatics are better. There is a lot also of metalinguistic support for it. Other dedicated call has been created for self-access without a teacher and often outside the classroom. And so oftentimes they're used by what we call recreational learners who love language learning, and they do it as a hobby, right? So we have the language learning social network sites, and we have the Language Massive open online courses as well. So this is very different from the case of in the wild for pleasure gaming and other things that then lead to incidental gains. This is about fully autonomous, self-instructed learners. They are out-of-class learners. They are recreationally learning the language, and they look for pedagogical materials with full intention, but they look in the wild for them. So Live Mocha is a good example, and it was studied by Lynn Warshauer and Blake. It's amazing the size of the volume of users that apps like this can have. So 60 million, they mentioned that it's like 4.1 million more students than anyone enrolled in foreign language classes in US public schools combined. That's an immense amount of language learning that is happening outside any formal environment. And of course, these types of apps and sites are very supportive of things that are not English. So for those of you who are teachers of other languages, it's an antidote against the English-centric world of language learning that we have. In this study, again, very large scale, they saw that participants felt that they learned a lot, and some of them, not so many of them, actually felt they were making progress. And the least progress was in grammar. However, there were more errors when people have been longer in the site, and when they reported having higher proficiency, and perhaps there were more errors because there was also more complexity in the things that they were doing. There was a high attrition, and this puts into question the benefits of technology being always uniformly motivating. Duolingo has been studied also by Sean Lowen, who is also in the audience. Where is Sean? There. With Dustin Crowther, who is also in the audience, and other people from Michigan State University. And so they analyzed 34 hours of from zero knowledge learning of Turkish by the authors and using logs and diaries. Their conclusion is that Duolingo prioritizes explicit knowledge devoid of contextual meaning. And there was a clear emphasis on grammar and vocabulary up to the sentence level. Very unrealistic language, things like the rabbit reads the book. And isolating presentation. For example, they mention, how are you? I'm fine, thank you. Both occur in Duolingo, in the Turkish version. However, they never occurred as a pair, which is what makes sense, right? So the benefit of more authentic language, the promised benefit of more authentic language for technology. Isabel, also from Michigan State University, has a study last year on an online community for language learning for Korean. He uses very interesting methods, ethnographic investigation. And he concludes pretty much that there was very little target language use and a great deal of learning about language in the community. So again, the benefits of intensified input and time on task, not really realized. And Chick and Ho, Jennifer Ho, is she in the audience? Yeah, she's there. They also have a study looking at the same area of learning. They did a very interesting thing. They did a 2010 study of three of them, Jennifer, I imagine that was you, and Alice and Kitty, one of the other authors and another colleague, they were learning, each chose to learn one language that they wanted to learn in the sites. And then in 2015, they did it again, and they decided to choose other languages because that's what they wanted to do at that time. So they noticed that presented with choices between resource hosting platforms like BBC Languages and language learning social network sites like Duolingo, they relied on the former. And so their description of what was happening to them in 2010 and even more so in 2015 is that participants tried to create their own language classrooms and had learned in isolation, with only graded materials and popular culture texts as resources. So yes, it was in the wild. Yes, it was self-motivated. Yes, it was taking advantage of a number of apps and sites that are out there, but in the end, the recreate a traditional language classroom style of learning was more powerful than taking full advantage of the social networking and the more community-oriented types of language learning that the wild offers when it's designed specifically for language learning. And so again, the benefits of intensified input and time on task are questioned, and more authentic language perhaps also questioned. However, FACIL, I like that acronym too, FACIL, fully autonomous, what's the S? Fully autonomous students, no, sites. It's self-instructed. Fully autonomous, self-instructed learners, FACIL, but of course the Spanish with a C instead of the S. It's easy, right? So idle for the gaming and the totally incidental type of wild language learning, and FACIL for the totally intent and very self-directed, pedagogically looking for things that you want as an autonomous learning. So in this study, Cole and van der Planck actually suggest that it is effective sometimes. With them, it was in Brazil, and the students were college age, and they really found evidence, they collected actual evidence of vocabulary and grammar, and they found that the FACIL learners were outperforming the traditional classroom learners. But it's very unclear in this study whether these FACIL learners were actually taking advantage of all the things that Chick and Ho said they weren't taking advantage. So at the same time, the for leisure in the wild opportunities and also the dedicated for self-access opportunities. So the power of motivation cannot be ignored in all these things. Here's a study of 2 children in Saudi Arabia teaching themselves Japanese at age 11 and 15. And they do it out of the pleasure and love of Japanese through anime, Instagram, and other online media. Right? So the bottom line then is that adults and children who study languages out of class autonomously, they are doing largely intentional and explicit learning. They may be following what Chick and Ho suggest is a principle of learn first, use later. So the basics first, the communication, the fun stuff much later, or never. And maybe facile types of learning are most successful when there are pressing returns, like in English, because it's the global language of power, or with powerful motivations, like these Saudi Arabian kids wanting to learn Japanese. And also when learners engage in the mixing and combining of vernacular and dedicated experiences in the wild, both. So the benefits of dedicated call are many, and when they are used by teachers under the control of teachers, whether inside or outside the classroom, the language gains are clear, and whatever we target, we see gains, vocabulary, grammar, pragmatics. When it's self-directed by learners with the teacher out of the way, then it seems like it has limited benefits. But we should be investigating more how much the most successful learners are combining both the very implicit for pleasure things that are available in the wild, plus the very sort of like stilted, traditional, potentially traditional pedagogical sites that are dedicated to language learning in the wild. Domesticating technologies, then, is the third and final type of technology. We have been seeing the social networking tools being brought into the classroom, the purpose of authorial creation, not just consumption of information, but creating information and artifacts online. And so the social media has definitely joined the language classroom. And a very recent paper by Jonathan Reinhardt reviews all this research, and the benefits that he identifies are intercultural and sociopragmatic competence, audience awareness, so this is a new type of outcome, and digital literacies, and also the development of learner and user identities. Becoming more confident, becoming the kind of person that we envision ourselves to be if we decide to learn Turkish or if we decide to be someone who speaks English well, etc. So wikis is a good example. They have been employed in classrooms now for a long time. Lina Lee, for example, has a nice study with very nice appendices showing us the assignments, the rubrics, so teachers can really use this study. And for her, the motivation and the writer development were clearly benefits of this, and there was great student satisfaction reported. And the sense of audience comes up again. And enjoyment, lots of enjoyment, with wikis used in the classroom to support writing of Spanish as a foreign language. Idoia Elola and Ana Oscos are two leaders in this area, and they have articles as early as 2010 and as recently as a couple of years ago reviewing this area. It's very vibrant what one can do for writing in a foreign language with the support of a diversity of social media technologies. Shannon Soro, I mentioned her here again, she has been spearheading the learning from fandom communities to develop curricular projects. So again, bridging, domesticating what we find in the wild for purposes in the classroom. So things like in these communities, they do beta readers, which are proofreader or critiquer, so a person who takes on the role of the proofreader or the critiquer, providing feedback before a piece of fan fiction is published. Or they also have collaborative threaded word games for simplified storytelling, and these are very popular in fan communities, so discussion forums that are added to the fan communities. They also have wikis to document information about characters, plots, events, and objects. And in these kinds of curricular designs based on fandom communities, the teacher may decide or not to send the students to actually join the fan community, the fan space, and try it out, or publish something that they write in the classroom. It depends on the students and how much you want to push them, or it may be an option that you give them. We are becoming even more complex in our use of technology, and the Web of Things is like a futuristic image of what's going to happen to us in the future. So technology obviously keeps changing constantly, and that's a problem for teachers and for researchers. But it seems to be less of a problem for our students, of course, because they keep coming to us at a younger age, and we just keep getting older. So there is a renewal of the student population. The ages remain the same. Whichever age you teach, they remain the same. But we researchers and teachers, we don't. But it's important to acknowledge that technology itself has created a whole new set of real-world target tasks and will continue to do so. So in our book on technology-mediated task-based language teaching, we stress very much, Marta and I, that tasks, needs, and digital literacies need to be at the center of thinking when we're thinking of technology. What are we asking students to do via the technology? What are their needs, and how is the technology-mediated things that we ask them to do going to meet their needs? And also, what are the literacies that they bring in terms of digital literacies that they bring with them which ones will they need that we need to make sure to teach them if they don't have them, and what digital literacies may they end up learning for free out of our doing language learning mediated by technologies. So we emphasize that there are new genres, new language, and new social interactional pragmatics that are stemming out of these new technologies. And the benefits will be maximal if the technology-mediated tasks are created after needs analysis for the language needed, for the actions and pragmatics needed, and for the digital literacies needed is carried out. So here's an example. Purchasing a mobile phone. I think my friend Anik de Houwer, who is also in the audience, just purchased a mobile phone yesterday, right? But it was face-to-face, right? It was in a shop, right? But now we can also do it online, right? So how is the same task, the same event, the same need, if we want to shop for a phone, how is it different if we do it by walking into the shop or online? What are the technologies needed in the case of the online, if we do it online, and what are the actions that our students are going to learn to do in the language they're learning, and how is the language then shaped and made different if the face-to-face event moves to the online environment? How many of you shop mobile phones online? Okay, and how many of you prefer to go into the shop? Ooh, we still, lots of us, good. Maybe our students are already doing most of their shopping of all kinds of things online, right? But they need to learn to do it now in their new language. Yeah? How can we analyze that and create then a technology activity module project that really caters to that kind of learning? The most popular domestication of call and mall, however, are not the things that I have been discussing, but computer-mediated communication, mostly synchronous and mostly text-based, so chat kinds of things, and telecollaboration. How many of you have done a telecollaboration or are doing a telecollaboration right now? Okay, nice. Quite a few people. So in these two types of domestication of technology, things that we do in the wild but we bring into the classroom, we see that CMC really is good for grammar and vocabulary, and we see that telecollaboration is really good for intercultural competence and speaking skills. Synchronous computer-mediated communication is changing fast. We used to have a lot of studies based on text, and that's almost disappearing because now we all can do Skype and Zoom and whatnot, right, to do our CMC activities. And so in a plenary at the TBLT conference in Barcelona a couple of years ago, John Norris analyzed the available evidence and concluded that if we do interactions with the mediation of technology, there's a moderate value added in comparison to face-to-face. Yeah? And it's just like face-to-face is good on average, and if we do it mediated by technology with CMC text, which is the data that we have up until recently, it's a little bit better. It's good and a little bit better. But also he saw that over time, with face-to-face, it seems like students keep learning more and more. And with in CMC, we just don't know if that's going to be true because we don't have the studies looking at long term. So the findings are encouraging, but there's a lot that we don't know. And besides, we should not be doing text-based CMC much anymore. We can do the audio-video CMC. And Marta Gonzalez, also in the same conference in Barcelona, looked at the evidence that we have from a few studies now on video synchronous CMC, and she concluded that pretty much is very similar to face-to-face, the benefits and what we learn. 10 minutes left, okay, good. With telecollaborations, here are the benefits that have been documented. They are motivating, greatly motivating. There's a lot of intercultural and socio-pragmatic competence that gets developed with telecollaborations. Students notice this and constantly mention it. There's more authentic language that they are immersed in through the telecollaborations. And definitely they intensify the input and the time on task. There are two promising environments. E-tandem, where partners meet online from remote areas, so from each person geographically in a different place. They meet online and they spend half an hour on one language, half an hour on the other language, such that for half an hour one is the expert and the other one is the novice, but for the other half hour the roles are reversed. And that seems to create a lot of interesting things that are good for learning, good for self-confidence, etc. With Lingua Franca, what we have, and this may surprise some of you perhaps, we have more and more programs setting up telecollaborations where neither side is English native speaking, but it's like Thailand and Korea. Students meet online to practice English and to do tasks and projects and things in English. So both are using English as a lingua franca. Very interesting studies coming out, because when linguistic expert novice roles are interchangeable and when the languages are shared, then things can happen that are surprising. In this study, for example, the students started changing their own perceptions of what they want to learn or what they want to get out of language. So now they think effective communication is more important than pronunciation. Now they realize that if you speak too quickly, whether you are a native speaker or not, people may still ask for a repetition. And this is another study with Italian, it's the tandem. So the previous one was the ELF, the English as a lingua franca, peers whose first language is not English. And this one was the half hour in English, half hour in Italian. Again, very interesting dynamics and results. And there is now a synthesis by a former student of mine, Yuka Akiyama and Joe Cunningham at my university in the German department. They synthesized 55 studies of telecollaboration. So we have tremendous amounts now of evidence, and the benefits that we think are there indeed are there. And Yuka has done her own studies with Kazuya Saito, and they have demonstrated listening comprehension improves and comprehensibility of the speech improves with telecollaboration. So what do we know from domesticated call? The benefits are broad and specific, both. They are for language and they are for much more than language. The traditional benefits of face-to-face are there and perhaps a little bit augmented. We can go well beyond traditional possibilities and make much more complex and open-ended types of activities and creations, but all of this is quite teacher demanding. Okay, I'm going to leave you with some deeper thinking very fast. Jonathan Reinhardt has very good 8 questions at the end of his review on social media for language learning in the language classroom. One is, what do we do with all the visual and multimodal resources that we're asking our students to create? Do we evaluate them as part of language learning? What do we do with them, right? And also, what is the responsibility that teachers have to raise awareness and address critical social media literacies when using social media? We also need to watch out for different ideologies with language, and often they are embedded in the software design. So Bunjens Kosten noticed that native speaker ideologies are often put into the product's software structure and even determine participation and actions by users. So Lang 8, which is now defunct, didn't have likes like Facebook. It had native nodes. So only natives could become the experts and only they could do notes to the learners. So everything was very constrained in that way. We also need to watch out for opportunities that are seized or missed with technology. For example, Yanguas in a review study mentions hypertext gloss and shows this example found in a Colombian Spanish text mono, which means in Iberian Spanish Rubio, and in Mexico, Güero, and in Venezuela, Catire. So 4 ways of saying the same thing, and they are due to sociolinguistic variation. Do we have hypertext glosses that help us teach this kind of thing? Probably not. Why not? It's a shame. This is what technology can help us do that we don't already do or cannot do, hardly can do with a textbook or a traditional classroom. So let's watch for such opportunities when we design technology or when we choose technology. And technology itself has created a whole new set of real-world tasks. So how do we respond to these challenges? The notions of authenticity, needs, and motivation are being changed by technology. And I like very much a view of authenticity, because it comes up so much in the technology literature, by Henry and Cliffordson. They say authenticity is not in the software, it's not in the content, it's not in the language, it's in the person. Authenticity is the experience of being true to one's self, and is generated when a person does something that fits with who they feel they are and coheres with their own particular view of the world. So when we choose technology for authenticity and motivation, can we hit on this? Do we know that we're hitting on this? Are we exploiting this? And finally, when talking about technology, it's unavoidable to think of the digital divide. So we have technology for all people, the web, the new technologies are all wonderful, but then we have the have-nots and the haves of technology, and a big gap, which is the digital divide. At the individual level, digital literacies per se have become super important and a hidden curriculum for success. So there are new skills that develop through the use of technology, and are we making sure that our students have them? And even more importantly, if they don't have those skills, are we trying to help them develop them? So things like the ability to adopt alternative identities for the purpose of improvisation and discovery, or the ability to meaningfully sample and remix media content. Those are new needs that technology has created, but they are needed for success. And other things have always been there, like the ability to evaluate the reliability and credibility of different information sources, but now with technology, they are becoming intensified. Are we teaching this to our students as well, and particularly to those who we may serve students who are not having these experiences of digital literacies in other classes on their own, in their families? So it's complicated, and it's not really at all about technologies for a few rich, and the rest of the world needs to worry about more important things. It's becoming a necessity to be technologically savvy, and to both language learning and digital literacies are becoming a must for many people. So the people who have those two, language learning and digital technologies, the least, are the people who need it the most for success. And we educators are there to mediate this. So in conclusion, we must work together, yes, and I think we are working together. A lot of these studies are done in classrooms with actual students during actual classroom time and curricular modules. Yeah? Because we must work together, because the great potential of MOBILLE is here, and it is to stay. And we have to pay attention to the fact that out-of-school technological lives are all important to our students, and we need to connect them with in-class technologies and support a two-way flow. If they know and do a lot of technology outside, maybe that will motivate them to do more things for language inside the classroom. But at the same time, if some of our students are not doing a lot of digital literacies in their own lives, and we bring that into the classroom, they're having the added benefit of developing digital literacies that are very important in today's world. So a two-way flow. And finally, the needs and the authenticity are going to be continuously transformed, because technology always evolves. So it will always be a challenge for us teachers and researchers to attend to these developments. Thank you very much.